I'm Eric Welander, welcome to my channel. Now, I've long said that listening to music across multiple rooms in your home is one of the best benefits of a smart home, and Apple AirPlay integrates really well with their whole ecosystem. You can set up music to play with HomeKit scenes, or just play audio straight from whatever's on your iPhone, and anything in between. Now, while Apple does let you play audio via AirPlay through HomePod Minis, HomePods, Apple TVs, Macs, and mini TV sets, some receivers and speakers, you might still have like that nice stereo system or some built-in speakers in your home, or maybe outdoor speakers that you'd like to add to this mix. And Eve Play aims to be the best balance of cost and performance for these kinds of use cases. Thanks to Eve for sending me an Eve Play free of charge to check out for you guys on the channel with no strings attached. And it has some unique features that you don't see on a lot of AirPlay devices, especially at this price point. And the one that struck me right out of the box is the Gigabit Ethernet port. And this instantly sets it apart from the less expensive Belkin Soundform Connect. But stay tuned to the end of the video where we'll break down how this Eve Play stacks up against all of its competition. And also, when we get to setup, there's some interesting details about how this Ethernet port actually works that I didn't really understand at first. The other headline feature of Eve Play is the Texas Instruments DAC, or digital to analog converter. Now, this is the chip that takes the binary bits, the digital data of your audio, and translates it into sound waves that you hear. A lot of consumer tech products out there have DACs built into them, but they often aren't very good. Now, if you're an audiophile, you've probably had experience with nicer digital analog converters. This one has a signal to noise ratio of 112 decibels, which I guess is pretty good, but it's something to keep in mind for how audio comes out of this AirPlay box, because you can send it with this DAC out an RCA output, which is what Eve supplies cables for in the box. The packaging from Eve calls them high-class RCA cables.
That's a terrible idea.
But if you do want to send the digital signal out to some other DAC, there's an optical output as well as coax. So you have some options here, and I tested both. So we'll talk in a minute about how they compare and if this DAC really makes a difference. Now, for putting it next to those speakers in setup, you just need to plug it into the speakers and power, and then you want to go ahead and download the Eve app if you don't have it already, and then go in the Eve app to settings, accessories, and then the plus button, and scan the HomeKit code. Then from there, it'll take you through the HomeKit setup process, and congratulations, achievement unlocked. You've now added one of the less common HomeKit devices to your smart home, which is an audio receiver. Yes, HomeKit has a category for audio receivers, and there are full-blown audio receivers that you can actually use in the Home app with AirPlay, but this device then acts as one in your smart home. Now, once you've gone through the process adding it to your home, then you need to set up audio sync. And this is where the Eve app is important. Now, if you do happen to add the device to your home via Apple's Home app, you can go back into the Eve app later and set up audio sync. But I think it's important because it helps the device know how long does it take for a digital command to get from a device then actually out to making sound in the speakers, so that way it can be in sync as it plays with other speakers in your house for multi-room audio. And it does this with a series of beeps, and the beeps get shorter and shorter as it figures out what the delay is. And a quick note for fellow YouTube reviewers out there, if you're screen recording this setup process, it seemed to not work for me. But if for whatever reason the process goes wrong, and maybe you got the audio output on something set wrong, and so you're not actually hearing sound from the speakers, then this synchronization step can set some crazy high numbers in milliseconds for the delay. So that can be annoying, and then probably would not make your audio work well. And then if you wanted to manually adjust that, all Eve gives you in the software right now is some plus and minus buttons. So have fun hitting that minus button like 3,000 times, or you just need to go through and get a successful sync to get the right amount of milliseconds. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video that there's an Ethernet port on this device, and it's great, but keep in mind that if you're doing the setup process where you plug in the Ethernet port and then just set it up that way, then if your Ethernet connection ever disconnects from the device, you're gonna have it offline and you'll have to reset it in order to add it to Wi-Fi. So I think it might be better to go ahead and set it up with Wi-Fi first, and then if you plug in Ethernet, the device will prefer a working Ethernet connection over Wi-Fi. So just keep that in mind. It gives you some easy flexibility down the road, or just a fallback if something goes wrong with the Ethernet connection. Now, if AirPlay does go offline for some reason, the status light on the front will flash white on and off. So what about the performance of actually using this device? Well, a lot of that's going to vary depending on your setup, because you're going to be connecting it to some kind of speakers or whatever that you already have. But that connection could be a key difference, because the AirPlay DAC, as I mentioned earlier, is very good. Now, I tried the RCA output versus an optical output to my Kanto U4 speakers, and I definitely prefer the Eve's built-in DAC. It sounds much better than the output from just the optical and then using the built-in DAC on these Kanto U4 speakers. So you might have a better DAC and then want to still use the digital output to send the signal to that. But if you don't, it's nice to have a decent option built into this device and then sending it out analog. Now, the other key performance thing here is audio synchronization. And for me, streaming music both to the AirPlay as well as other HomePods in my home worked just fine. I didn't have any latency issues with the device falling behind playback or anything like that. Of course, this was after making sure that my audio synchronization setup succeeded. So, how does this stack up against the competition, and which option is best for you? Now, if you're looking to do this kind of a thing with a home theater setup, maybe you already have, let's say, some nice speakers in your living room for your TV and movie watching. Well, there I would go with an Apple TV or AirPlay built into a television set for just doing AirPlay, because that works with both AirPlaying video as well as audio, unless you're not gonna have a good DAC in that setup and that you think makes a good difference in your audio quality. Then I could maybe see putting an AirPlay there as well. Now, the other one to consider is the Belkin Soundform Connect, which retails for $50 less than the AirPlay at $100, but I've often seen it on sale at this point for less than $70, and that doesn't have Ethernet, so it's just Wi-Fi. It has optical out as well as a headphone jack. It doesn't seem to have quite as nice of a DAC, and it's powered by USB-C. I've previously reviewed this device on my channel. Another device I've seen in this category but haven't tried myself is the Weem Pro, which has AirPlay, Ethernet, and lots of inputs and outputs, Spotify Connect, Chromecast support, like everything under the sun, but it doesn't seem to have as good of a DAC, and so people end up pairing it, at least based on reviews and other things I've seen on Amazon, pairing it with a DAC to actually up the audio quality. Now, the top of the line option probably in this category, without going too crazy off the deep end in terms of money, is the Sonos amp. This has a lot more features, integrates with all of the Sonos stuff beyond AirPlay 2. It has HDMI eARC if you want to connect it for TV audio, and it can also serve as an amp for passive speakers, which this cannot. But that whole package for the Sonos amp costs $700, so much more than $150 for the AirPlay. So, while AirPlay isn't the cheapest or the most full-featured in this category, I think it adds a good balance of features, especially for less than $150. You don't see devices for that cheap having this good of a DAC, along with an array of outputs and Ethernet for AirPlay. So it could be a really nice way to bring some more speakers you already have or are thinking of getting into the mix of multi-room home audio for your smart home. I'd love to hear some details down in the comments below if you have a cool setup or some way you're looking to use AirPlay. And I have my Belkin Soundform Connect review linked here, as well as another video that YouTube might think you'll like somewhere here on the screen. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.